So moving on now, we've mentioned this phrase a couple of times during this discussion, hearts and minds. But what we're looking at here is how you change leadership minds. For example, if you're at a company that don't currently have a project, process excellence project or an operational excellence project, who are completely green to the topic and to the idea, how do you change executive and leadership minds in order to get sign-off perhaps for some budget or some resource? How do you begin on that journey? How do you win them over when you don't have any tangible evidence? Who would like to begin with that?
Well, I suppose I can tell you our story. I'm not sure it's the only way of doing these things, but I think certainly in a conservative industry like law, things are going to move quite slowly. So things did move quite slowly in our case. Senior management's interest was piqued when they meant to meet some people who spoke about the benefits of process improvement. I think, no doubt, there was a high degree of skepticism in that, yet they saw demonstrations of it, they saw how well it had worked in manufacturing examples, and very slowly decided to dip their toe in the water, and that then became my challenge, I suppose, to prove that it actually worked. And so we did do it slowly. We started with a small budget. We started with one person. We started with what seemed like an easy project to bring benefits, and then built it up slowly from there. As we said earlier on, I actually don't think it's hugely difficult to convince the executive level management of the benefits of these sorts of things. As a starting point, you've got clients, customers, customer feedback. You may have competitors who are doing similar things. Probably your clients, certainly in our case, many of our clients were doing activities such as this and asking us whether we thought about doing the same. So the drive was certainly there. The next challenge was to prove its efficacy and then grow it, which takes us back to the conversation at the beginning. But I think certainly lawyers, but I imagine most executives are skeptical but rational. So once you start proving these things to people, then the story grows from there.
Were there any terminology issues? So you mentioned you used manufacturing examples. How did that translate in a legal setting? Was there any reluctance there, or?
So I think terminology is a big part of it, and my background is as a lawyer, so I joined the team as the lawyer, I think, to bridge the external expertise in process improvement to the work of a law firm. And we don't use a lot of the terminology that you might find outside a law firm. We certainly don't use a lot of the terminology you would find in manufacturing. We rarely speak in Japanese to each other. We try and simplify it and make it amenable to the people that we are actually working with. And perhaps some of the time it took us to have the early successes was understanding exactly how to do that translation to make it work for lawyers. And the translation really is keeping it quite high level and quite straightforward. We rarely have processes with thousands of data points flowing through them. We're lucky if we can find 10 perhaps sometimes. So we often operate at quite a high level in that sense. So we're not speaking in gobbledygook to people. We're trying to speak their language. But learning that was important.
Stuart, you were going to add something there when Oliver gave us his story.
Yeah, I'm a very big fan of study tours, and I'm involved with a number of best practice programs. And we take people out to go and see it in operation at other factories and other businesses outside of our industry. So we would go into banking, we'll go into chocolate manufacture. We're actually in nanotechnology, so we're a scientific business. We would go into car industries. We'll go and visit other businesses and talk to the people that are engaged in it and listen to their stories and their benefits. And I think that's a huge way of getting people to buy in. You can paint a picture of what it's going to do to you and the benefits it will bring to the organisation. But the minute they actually see it in action, and they see the enthusiasm and the change that's happened within an organisation, that's when people start to buy it in. There's only so many, and like Oliver, we run lots of simulation exercises, including Lego, but it only covers part of it. It's when you actually go and see it in practice and you listen to people and they tell you about how their world has changed and how it's improved them. That's when we start to get buy-in from our teams.
Can I add the other really useful thing I think about those sorts of visits, because whenever our clients are interested in what we do and they have similar process excellence, I often get invited to see how they do it, and they're usually much further ahead than we are. So I leap at the chance to go on one of these study tours, as Stuart calls them, and see how they operate. But one of the most powerful things, I think, is to see other people's approaches and then challenge yourself. So you see the enthusiasm, you see the rigor, you see the benefits that they're getting from it, and certain things, particularly with our light touch, high level, early adopter approach that we perhaps have dismissed as being too manufacturing or something that couldn't work. I've come back from these study tours and thought, hang on, perhaps we should give something like that a go, and managed to find a way to make it work. So seeing how other people do it, as well as selling executives on the point, is really a good way of challenging the people doing it to make sure that they are doing the best they can.
George, are you a fan of study tours as well?
Listening to what Oliver and Stuart have reported about, two things came to my mind. One was, in the last years I have been often in a position that I was to deploy a sort of a Lean Six Sigma transformation program in a business division of an organization where the board had already given the mandate to do it, but the divisional leaders were not bought in, or would not understand why it was relevant for them. And I had indeed a specific experience where cracking that, getting them to give it a serious try, we were only given a single chance to crack that. It took me months to actually get to that opportunity. And I think how I prepared myself and used this opportunity successfully was first by reading my stakeholders carefully. So I knew what would motivate them to do the change, what would make them resist us, what would be a win for them. And I knew when the tipping point was to give it a try now, and how to win some key people in the audience over. And in that specific event that's currently on my mind, we won them over by being given the opportunity to go to an off-site meeting with them, a management leadership meeting, where we actually put them into a simulation. So we didn't talk them through lots of theory, but we directly put them into a simulation, an exercise. As Oliver said, people need to experience it themselves. So they saw it, and it made sense to them. And then at the end of that session, it was only about an hour, 1.5 session, really the discussion was in the room. Shall we give this a serious try? Does that apply to us? Does it make sense? And luckily the people nodded and said, yeah, let's give it a try. It seems to work. We understand what this is about, and let's try it out. And of course, we over the coming weeks, we then kept it to this. Always made sure that the people would see, the senior leaders would see the benefit, what it would be for them, and so they would be willing to give it a serious try. I as well have been in a situation where we have been hosting customer events in an organization that had implemented largely Lean. It was actually in data centers where they had implemented Lean in our organization, and we were hosting other companies, getting visits from senior managers.
George, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's a lot of background noise from somebody's computer.
Yeah, I think that has just disappeared. So I'll start again. Sorry for that. So we were hosting we were hosting customer events, or basically events with people who were earlier on the lean journey, tried to adopt it, and we had senior managers visiting us. And it was in an IT world, and as well we had people from various organizations, like Stuart reported. We had banks visiting us, we had even manufacturing companies visiting us from various industries, talking to the leaders who had already been through the journey, talking from them peer-to-peer, like a customer service manager talking to a customer service manager, an ops manager talking to an ops manager. That was really the convincing part, which made people leave the place excited and turn them from somebody who had only heard about it to somebody who had seen it with their own eyes, and made them believers into, hey, this could actually work, and this guy was able to talk to me from the position he had been in 2 years ago, when he was probably where I am now. So because they could make these peer connections, they felt picked up from the point these people were now, and they could then see how the future could look for them if they were following the same path. That's how I have seen that we created massive support on senior levels for such a transformation.
So we've certainly got a consensus. I think that research pays. Out of industry research, if you have no internal data, is the way to go. I did an interview with a gentleman from Velux a couple of weeks ago, who echoed what you've said, but he did also say that even so, it still takes somewhat a leap of faith on management's part. They have to believe, they have to be prepared to take the chance. Would you agree that that's also a requirement? I thought it was quite poetic. Any thoughts on a leap of faith before we move on?
You have to trust the journey. Yeah, you cannot prove it with results in your own organization before you have actually started. So you can show that others have achieved results with doing similar things, but you will typically not find an example which is from your own industry, from your own location as well.
Oliver, Stuart, a leap of faith before we move on?
Craig, I would add that the job of senior management is risk mitigation. And what we've been talking about is reducing that risk by demonstrating success in similar and dissimilar organizations, and getting them a chance to go and see the benefits and the opportunities. So there's always some degree of faith required, but our job is to reduce the amount of faith required, if you like, by this mitigating the risk, by demonstrating the successes, showing them that the opportunities are huge.
You're far more cool-headed than I am, Stuart. Sorry, Oliver, go on.
I don't think that nothing that's innovative is ever going to come along without a bit of risk. I agree with Stuart's risk mitigation point, but if it had been done before in your organization, it wouldn't be new and you wouldn't be thinking about doing it. So if you want to really make an impact, you've got to take a risk, but it should be a calculated risk, and you can do your best to do your research in advance.
Okay. I think we've just about got enough time to move on to the fourth and final topic, global OPEX or global PEX. How do you build internal strategies, process strategies, OPEX strategies globally? Who would like to start us off with that?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. We've got sites all around the world, and we are looking at a global program. And what we've done from Oxford's point of view is we've developed a model of what we believe OPEX will look like for us, and a roadmap that supports that model, so only that people can go along, the different sites can go along. And we've also developed an assessment, a maturity assessment, so we can measure progress against it. But each site is going to be very different. They're starting from a different point. They could have different challenges and different issues. So each site is allowed a great deal of freedom within that model, the framework of that model, to develop their program, and we'll support them on their journey that way. So we start off with a big picture. This is where we want to get to. This is how we want to get there. This is what it will look like. Then we'll do a baseline assessment of the site, find out what level the site is at, and then develop their individual journey that will take them along our bigger picture. So we're coming at it from both angles. There's a high level view, and then there's a local site view.
How about regional legislative requirements, cultural differences between different organisations? Are these issues or perhaps challenges that you've faced?
Yes, they are. The cultural things, and I don't want to stereotype too much, but yes, I mean we've got factories around the world. Some nations are quite subservient, and they tend to do it because you told them to do it, but they're not really understanding why. They're just doing it almost to keep face, if you like. Other nations can be a little bit, can push back a little bit. So we've had a number of different styles. We've even recruited people that come from the local area with specialist skills of that area that can help us put the message across. I'm going to give it a perspective from a UK view, and that may not be appropriate for every site. So yeah, we'll work so hard to try and understand the local culture and the best way for doing it in that area. I think you have to take that into consideration.
How would you, Oliver? You mentioned you've certainly practiced law in your lifetime. How would you set about creating a global PEX strategy from a legislative perspective with various local rules and regulations? Is this something that you can do as a broad sweeping process, or is that perhaps overreaching a little?
I think it depends what level of detail you want to get into. I suppose from my position it's almost twice as complicated because our service is the service of law or the provision of legal advice. So I'm not only facing different legislative practices insofar as how they affect my colleagues in the different offices, it actually affects how they go about practicing their job and also market practice, local cultures or whatever. So I mean, I think the most obvious way it impacts people is in relation to your various human resources policies about how you can motivate people, how you can demotivate people, and perhaps taxation for the things you might want to give them to help motivate them, and how that impacts things. And that's going to be perhaps jurisdiction specific, and you're going to need to work with people on the ground to understand what levers are available to you, both culturally and legally in that sense. But I don't think for your strategy you necessarily need to get into that level of detail, and I would imagine that the approach that Stuart talked about can operate still at a higher level, and then it's only once you get into the detail in each location that you need to consider how to fine-tune these things for your different offices. We again perhaps have another slightly different challenge on it, and it's that the lawyers in all our offices do broadly the same work, or at least similar things, and they often work together. So I can't afford not to take things on a global perspective. A large proportion of our deals are cross-border, where we have people working together from day one. So we need to work globally in that sense, but as we were saying earlier, it's not as straightforward as developing an operating model that works well in one location, particularly if that location is your largest head office location, as it's probably often going to be, and then trying to impose that on everybody else around the world. because things that are imposed on people from head office, in my experience, are often treated even more sceptically than lawyers would treat everything else. So fine-tuning in the way that you work with people at a local level is much more important.
Okay. George, do you have any thoughts on this? I think we're going to have to begin wrapping it up now. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Quickly, I already mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that we have reorganized our PEX organization across regions. And the way we have structured it now is that we have a center team who works with the board on what the strategic priorities are that PEX shall support. We as well have 8 regional teams who are close enough to the countries to be able to make things relevant for that respective culture, for that respective part of the world. And what we as well do, we appoint leaders from this regional community to take care of specific subjects, of specific topics to drive the content as well. So for instance, of the 4 or 5 strategic priorities we have been tasked with this year, our region took the lead on one, Latin America took the lead on another subject, North America was leading another subject for global, plus the deployment in their own region. And that has been working quite effectively. So putting the regional people in has made sure that not everything that arrives in the countries is perceived as another thing out of head office that is forced on us, but has as well made sure that we can travel across a region and be close to the people and adapt the things to their needs, still making sure that what center corporate wants to achieve with it will be achieved within the various country organizations. So that's how we have tackled it. I think that has been a quite successful approach so far.
Okay, thank you. I think that's everything we have time for today.
Thank you,
so
Craig.
Oliver, George, Stuart, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for taking part in this discussion.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Oliver, did you make any progress with your Lego?
No, I'm afraid I didn't. I've still only got my one.
Oh,
I was paying too much attention.
you need a better process for that. You need a better process. Okay, well, thank you to our panelists, and thank you to our audience for joining us as well. Our panelists will be among speakers at PEX Week Europe in April of next year. For more information on the event and on their presentations, you can visit www.pexweekeurope.com. And as always, for more interviews, white papers, reports, infographics, and more, visit www.pexnetwork.com. Thank you, and